or join the team at sport-social.co.uk.
Hello, welcome back to the FPL Masterclass. I'm your host, Haider Rubbani. I'm joined by Rob Blanchette as always. It is game week 32, Rob. It is an absolute minefield at the minute. I had a couple of bad game weeks with that free hit game week, hit me back up, got 70 points. Obviously, we haven't done the show for a while. And then I managed to have a decent one last week, around 60 odd points. So I'm very, very happy with that. I know the average is very, very low. But now it's really time to gamble, isn't it? Because we're having a look at, sort of, how can you climb your leagues? What are the risks you can take? What are other people not going to be doing that you can do? I've still got 2 chips left. I've got the bench boost and I've got my wild cards. So I've got a little strategy in place and I'm starting to climb those leagues. And I just want to win my leagues. That's the most important thing.
Well, this is about whatever your objectives are now going into the final 7 weeks of the season, which is amazing to say that we've been here the whole campaign long doing the show and obviously looking at week to week where you can exploit the numbers and where you can get some extra few points. So, of course, like you just said there, your objective is to win your leagues. That's what you're looking to do. Other people's objectives is to be in the top 1%. So that's in the top 90,000 players out of the 9 million. So I get that. It's kind of another objective for some people. And for some people, it's now actually just about rolling the dice and seeing how many points they can get. It's the end of the season. You know, they might be mid-table in all their leagues. They're not that bothered. They're just looking for that big opportunity towards the end of the campaign. So what we'll do is we'll try and talk through most of that today and obviously set you up for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, before we start, as always, give us a follow on at TF Masterclass. Give myself a follow on at Haider_Rubbani. And give Rob a follow on at _Rob_B. He always posts his team, don't you, Rob? Usually on Twitter, either just after the deadline or maybe just before. Drop him on myself a message or tweet us, and we'll obviously have a chat about the team as well. But look, let's start with game week 31 overview. As you can see, you did really well there, considering the average was just very low. There was a lot of people that made a lot of selections. Players didn't play. Players got rotated. We'd have the Champions League coming up as well, so that's very important. Trent was out. I actually made the call. Trent took him out for Robertson, and I was really happy with that in the end because that really helped me. I captained Salah as well, much like yourself. But really, Cancelo getting an assist, Doherty we both had. I mean, the Spurs players were the ones that really sort of turned it around for me. I had Kulusevski, Doherty, and I didn't actually have Son, but I was really happy with my returns in the end as well. But all in all, we're going to talk about Salah today because obviously he's the player that we were saying just before the AFCON. We were saying he's a player that you must have. If you don't have Salah, you're not going to win your leagues. Now we're thinking, is it actually time to sell Salah? So talk a little bit about your team. Obviously, you're sitting at 24,000, just outside 24,000 in the world. So you're doing really, really well, and just chipping away and getting those average points each week.
Yeah, just looking back to, as I said, to this game week, it was a little bit of a toss of a coin about whether I went with Son or Salah as captain. It is just what it is, isn't it? When Salah scores goals, he's the obvious captain. You stick with him long term. Now, as you just saying there about AFCON, certainly around that point, there was no point in having any other premium except Salah because no one else was doing anything. And that was including the likes of Son. Harry Kane hadn't turned up yet for the season long. Even Mane was doing okay, but not really delivering numbers. And the Man City crew of the top end, talking Kevin De Bruyne more than anyone, really were not returning numbers. But of course, things do change. That's normal. We're now at the point of the season, as I said, where individual managers' objectives have changed. So as you can see there, Salah's still in my team. I'll tell you at the end of the show whether Salah is going to be in my team for next week. But you do now have some viable options, at least in the premium market, to change it around. Now, of course, some people have got some chips. You've still got them. Haider, obviously, you can speak a little bit more about that now. I've got really no chips left. I've used them all, and I utilised them in game weeks earlier in the season where I felt I could make a killing.
Do you have any regrets that you don't have anything?
Not at all. No, not at all. No, I don't need to. I'm absolutely where I want to be. So obviously there on the left is my overall ranks, 24,000th. That's 0.3 in the top 0.3% in the world. So the objective is always to be in the top 1%. So that's to be 90,000th and above. So 24,000th. Jobs are good, and that shows the strategy works. So for me, no regrets, because the thing is, you've got to plan it long term as a long term strategy. So yeah, there might have been a week where I used my triple captain and only got 7 points, 8 points or something, and it's like, oh, boo hoo. But it's not really about that. It's about utilizing it overall. So your number at the end of the day is a big number. At the moment, I'm on 2,073 points. So this is obviously the team that we always review for this show. If you're above 2,000 points, you're doing brilliantly. That's as good as you can really do. You're in that top echelon, top 40,000, top 50,000, top 0.5% in the world. So no, I'm happy that I've used my chips, because I felt that I used them at the right time. And also, especially things like my bench boost. And, we obviously got the two immediate chips that we could change your team, because there was that obviously furore when there was a blank game week. I used both of them almost back to back and capitalized. Got, I think, 120 points one week and 90 or 95 points the following week. So timing is everything, but also a lot of people save their chips to the end of the season and the season runs flat. So you get to the last 2 or 3 game weeks and no one's really doing anything. Players are being rotated in and out. Your mid-table players have kind of clocked off. They've gone on holiday. And you might find the likes of City and Liverpool, even though they're going to be fighting till the bitter end for the Premier League title, they will have one eye possibly on a Champions League final. And that will affect FPL selections.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, we know we're going to do a bit of forward thinking. So we're going to look at game week 32, obviously, but we're also going to keep one eye on game week 33, because there's a double game week for certain teams. And those teams, Rob, that we're sort of going to keep an eye on are really Leicester, Burnley, Arsenal, United, Southampton, Brighton, and Newcastle. So let's have a look at this. This graphic is from FPL Scout. As always, guys, the teams at the top have the easiest fixtures, and the teams at the bottom have the most difficult ones. Really key also, Rob, to have a look at some of the players that have Villa, Leeds, and Wolves. Definitely time to take some of those out. I know that I've got Ramsey sitting on the bench, so he is a cheap option, but he's definitely someone that's probably going to come out. I've got Jimenez sitting on my bench as well. He got sent off the other day in that double game week, so he's going to be coming out my team. And that's actually quite a large chunk. You're looking at like 7.5 million, I think. But I'm really struggling with my strikers this year, because I don't think there's any strikers that are really banging in the goals. Broja hasn't really done very much for me since he's come into the side. Obviously, Dennis dropped off a little bit. I've never gone for the premiums. Ronaldo, Lukaku never plays. And Antonio got me an assist last week. But strikers are really difficult, because you're not getting value for money really in that area. So yeah, talk to the listeners a little bit about sort of the key teams to look at here as you're going into game week 32 and 33.
Yeah, just to add on to the strikers there, we're hoping next year that FPL, and it has been talked about, will give you a strikerless option, so you can pick.
Is that really a thing?
Yeah. There's talk about there's been chats about it in previous seasons, because you're now getting to a point where the return from strikers is just poor. So why can we not change our teams in a way that a system in proper football you would have? Maybe a 4-6-0, wouldn't you? You'd play with that. That's a real formation now. It's not a made-up formation. So, FPL is supposed to be able to reflect what managers can do with their teams and not always just be held by the rules. So, as you just said there, like players like Broja have done all right. I had Antonio for most of the season. He did well. But you've stayed away from the likes of Ronaldo and Kane earlier in the campaign because they just were not returning numbers. So the idea was, and we advised this here, was to just go dirty cheap on them, just have the cheapest that you could get and bench them and maybe play one of them. So that's what I did last week. You just saw my team a minute ago. I had Broja Days now got injured. So that's just how it is. So just looking ahead now, with the double game week coming up in game week 33, you can see that there is several teams here now that have got 3 games in the next 2 game weeks. So this is what we want to focus on here. But as we have also said in previous double game weeks, it gets tricky because you don't want to buy players who might give you a sudden uplift, say next week, but don't really give you that lift all the way through to the end of the season. So you're looking for opportunities, but you don't want to kill your team every week or with your transfers. So what will a lot of people do? They'll have their one of their chips, won't they? And they'll try and utilize it because it's a double game week. But you might actually find that you're being tempted by the devil. It's kind of pulling you there because you've got double game week. We're near the end of the season. How do I use my chips? Now you've got to use your chips eventually. But when you look at it here, there's only really 2 or 3 teams with these double game weeks coming up that have attractive options.
Yeah, but look, my sort of strategy is to always avoid United players. I know last season Luke Shaw was great value for money. Mason was at one stage as well a couple of seasons ago, or last season. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. Bruno as well. Obviously, Bruno's been a great player, but as soon as he's off penalties as well, we've seen the issues with Ronaldo. United's form's rubbish. United are a bad side. We talk about this a lot on the Masterclass. They're a poor side. They don't have a full-time manager. So I don't know. There are not many players, but we will talk about one player in particular who we're looking to target. I just want to touch quickly on City and Liverpool there, because obviously, both in the Champions League, both playing each other. Liverpool beating Benfica quite comfortably last night actually is going to be an advantage for FPL players, I think, because I think you could see Klopp maybe giving Salah a rest leading up to it. But what would you be doing with those players? Because I know this show is centered around Salah, but City haven't really hit that much great form either. And, I know they've got a couple of easy games coming up with Watford and Leeds, but Liverpool and City could be an absolutely fantastic game with a lot of goals, but also the matchup could be a 0-0 and then move on.
Absolutely. So if you're looking for attacking returns from those 2 teams, which is what you generally do, obviously everyone has Liverpool defenders as well there who can do both at both ends and get clean sheets and assists. But I think when you look at the 2 there, it's now not being overly concerned about where they are in this difficulty league. So they're both here mid-table because they've got difficult fixtures moving forward. You do expect both teams to win those fixtures. It's just that who's going to play what players where and when. So we can look back at history, and we can also just look back now at the last couple of weeks. So Manchester City traditionally, as it gets to this business end of the season, whether they're in a campaign chase or not, looking for a title or not, they start to rotate heavily because they're towards the end of the campaign. They've got surplus players that need minutes, and they're going into the back end of a Champions League. Liverpool, on the flip side, do the opposite. So you said that Salah might get a rest. There is no chance Salah's going to get a rest. Salah will play all of these games because I think Liverpool and Klopp do believe that when you take Salah out your team, you are sufficiently weaker no matter who's playing. So even though you've got Diaz, you've got Jota, you've got Firmino could come back in, you've got Mane, there's no doubt still that over the course of a season that Salah is the guy. But what we will say is this: Salah in the 3 of the last 4 weeks has hit blanks. So this is why the question is it time to sell Salah? Because you're looking at your team progressively for 7 weeks now. The season is only 7 weeks long. What can you do in those numbers with that over that time period in 7 weeks? Salah is one of the highest valued players in FPL. Could you get the same numbers from him, from another player, and bank some money and use that in your defense or your attack, like we're just saying there, with the attackers being so poor this year? So that's what we have to discuss really when it comes to Salah, because I think what will happen is that the managers that gamble correctly on Salah, so I'm not saying one way or the other how Salah's going to play, but the ones that get it right, either by selling him or keeping him, you're going to win your leagues. It's as simple as that. So a lot of managers at the moment have gone to the top of their leagues because they sold Salah around the AFCON and never went back to him. But then they sold him maybe in the last 2 or 3 weeks as well, some managers, and they went with Harry Kane, who's had big returns. So this is where it comes down to now a bit of strategy in a more of a short form kind of view of looking at the league.
Let's look at some of the lesser players. So we'll start with James Maddison. Fantastic form. He's got 6 points. He's averaging 6 points a game at the minute. And the price is fantastic, 6.8. And you look at the ICT rankings with Leicester's double coming up, he is definitely an option for FPL players.
Yeah, he's had a better second half of the season, hasn't he, for Leicester? And Leicester as a club are having a better second half of the season, looking much more dangerous, creating more opportunities. Still without Vardy, and I think Vardy is always the the metronome for the Leicester attack, and he allows other players to get him assists and get bigger numbers. But I think what you've also seen with Leicester is they've just got more balance now in the top end, and Maddison is a big part of that. So, as you just said there, the price at 6.8, ownership of now just under 10% across the board. It shows, it was only several weeks ago. I think no one had Maddison. No one was interested. But you see his ICT numbers: 26 for influence, 28 for creativity, 29 for threat, overall 21. That's great numbers. That shows that he might be worth a punt. If you're going to go with anyone with this double game week, Leicester really are the team. I think they've got the biggest opportunity. So this is a kind of place where you could make a chess move. You could go, this is where I get rid of Salah. I'm bringing in Maddison, and I'm going to save 7 million quid, and I'm going to throw that at another premium. If you could get the premium that pops the most in the next few weeks, this is what I mean by saying that you'll be the one that wins your league.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on now to Harvey Barnes, a player that I actually brought in for the free hit week, and he got me an assist or a goal, I think. So, again, look, the price is fantastic at 6.6. And when you are looking to supplement the squad, your squad with, let's say the more mid-range players, I mean, he's definitely one of them. I know his form is only 3.0, and Maddison's actually been the one who's hit more form, who's getting more returns. But another great option if you can't afford the 6.8.
Yeah, I think Leicester, both these two players, if Leicester do well, say in the next 3 matches, obviously 2 game weeks, these two players will be involved somewhere. They'll get assists, they might get goals. So for Leicester to be successful in those 2 game weeks, Barnes and Maddison have to perform. So this is where the gamble might pay off. So again, you could look at Barnes and Maddison as a double up, and you could lose Salah and then use the money elsewhere. Now, I'm not doing that. I'm sticking possibly with Salah on this, but I do think that if you want an extra player somewhere, as you just said there about Ramsey at Villa, someone who was a little bit of a wild card earlier in the season, but has gone really flat. That's because Villa themselves are pretty flat. So you're looking for those opportunities where you're going to get extra minutes out of players. And as I said, Leicester are the team that seem to be the ones leaning in the next 2 or 3 weeks to have those better fixtures.
Let's move on to the final player, and that's Iheanacho. Important to note, Rob, when you're thinking about all of these 3 players, is that Jamie Vardy is out. So he's not playing at the minute. So where are the goals going to come from? Iheanacho scored at Old Trafford last week. I've been a little bit surprised. He's starting to get more minutes now, but he had a great season last season. He was one of the players I relied on quite heavily. Got me some really good returns. And, he hasn't really played as much in the first half of the season, playing a little bit more now. Form's pretty decent. But, yeah, you're right. If you're looking to supplement Vardy's loss and you're looking for points, the triumvirate of Iheanacho, of Barnes and Maddison is what's going to make Leicester successful in these next couple of games.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some Leicester fan FPL players out there who will go as like kind of a treble up with these 3 because they'll want to go with their team. And as we said at the start of the season, don't do that. Don't look at FPL as a mirror of your own fandom. Do you
Unless
know what I mean?
you're a City or a Liverpool fan, you can't do that.
Yeah, no. So do you know what I mean? Like you stick with those teams because they're the ones that get the FPL points. I think with Iheanacho, obviously scored at Old Trafford the other week, made me very glum as I watched it go in the back of the net as they're at Old Trafford. But he is a player that has now played his way into form. Nothing really to write home about his total points, 61 points for the season. 7 million feels expensive in a striker market where there's lots of value at the bottom end, but can you find by investing extra 1 or 2 million pounds into Iheanacho? His form is good at 3.7. That's on the right side of going in the right way. 29th for influence, 24th creativity, 41st for threat. He is an option. So you've got 3 games coming up in a short period of time with a double game week. He might be the diamond in the rough. I think when you look at the strikers, even at the bottom end of the striker market, there's no one doing it. So if you can find someone that isn't Harry Kane, because Harry Kane's the only striker really returning big numbers, and also we will talk about Ronaldo in a second. He's another option, but a big gamble. I think Iheanacho fits into a plan of maybe for the rest of the season that if you did want to, maybe a secondary striker, but someone who like this week would take the reins as with a double game week coming up, that you could go with him and he might provide some value for you if you've got some money in your pocket.
Absolutely. Let's move on now to Arsenal. Arsenal's a bit of a funny one, Rob, because, really bad defeat against Palace. I didn't see that coming, but Palace are great. I saw your tweet about Patrick Vieira, and I actually agreed with that. I think he's done a stunning job over there. He's manager of the season for me. But Palace completely outpressed Arsenal. They outworked Arsenal. They're great quality on the ball. But when you're looking at Arsenal's form, and we've got Cedric up here because we're thinking no Kieran Tierney now. Would you be looking to get someone like Cedric in? Obviously, he's very, very cheap for Arsenal's run-in. They have got a couple of hard fixtures coming up, to be honest, especially next 3 game weeks.
Arsenal, a bit of a problem. They really are, because there's 2 ways of looking at this. Arsenal are chasing top 4, so they've got to be good to get that. So if they come in the top 4, it will be because in the last 7 weeks of the season they performed. The problem is that when you dig into Arsenal and you look at them individually, their individual form numbers have all fallen way off. The only player who hasn't really fallen away is Saka. So everyone else has kind of had a big dip. But as you just said there now, there's this issue with Tierney being injured. Arsenal got problems at the back when Tommy Asu is also injured, or he's out for a period of time. They haven't really got a lot of width. So Cedric looks like the guy who's going to get minutes. Now, actually, when you look at his latest games, I think here on the right-hand side, we've got his last 7. He's playing games. So he's already getting selected. So you can almost guarantee that he will start these matches and probably play 90 minutes. It's just that, can he get you points returns? I think at 4.2 million, he's worth the risk, because I think any of these defenders that you see around that 4 million mark. So there has been a few this year around 3.94 million mark, which in years gone by you wouldn't have touched, that these players are playing games. So this is a top 4 team in Arsenal, or prospective top 4 team. And Cedric, when he was at Southampton going back over time, did really, really well, got good numbers. So if you're going to gamble on anyone at Arsenal at the moment, I would say Cedric is the player. I would even say now that this is the time to dump Ramsey. Because not Ramsey, sorry, the goalkeeper. Ramsdale, because you're seeing with Arsenal is that they're just not as watertight as they were. So when they were going up the league, they were getting clean sheets every week. And we were highlighting that here and saying this is the time to buy into Arsenal, even though they're 10th and they're 9th and they're 8th and they're 7th. Now they're kind of in the top 4 conversation. We're at the business end of the season. They've got a ton of injuries, and it's hurting them. So Cedric at 4.2 is a decent gamble. Would I be gambling elsewhere of Arsenal? I'm not so sure. But we're going to look at some of the rest of the squad just to kind of explain that fact to you.
Absolutely. Let's move on. So we're going to be talking about form here, Rob, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
And
availability.
Look, I've got Saka and availability. Yeah. So look, from the top, Partey, Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli, Xhaka, and Smith Rowe. I've got Saka in my side. And 6.8, I'm going to savor him being this cheap, because next season he's probably going to be 8, 8.5, 9, probably what Rashford is. What are your thoughts here? Look, Odegaard's kind of fallen off the map. We've seen that Smith Rowe has as well. Martinelli, not really performing. I didn't actually realize until obviously we're doing this show right now. I didn't realize, how patchy Arsenal's form was, because they've just been so good. So, what are your thoughts here when you're having a look at this?
Well, it shows the numbers don't lie, because the loss at Palace, you said obviously you were surprised by that. I think when you look at Arsenal's form, there should be no surprise, because they have fallen off for whatever reason. And I do think that some of it is just about availability. So if you look there, Partey at the top, 5 million, 4.8, their best player on form by a mile. He's out. He's injured. Saka at 6.8 million, obviously again perennial for a lot of players, 4.5 in form, plays multiple positions. We're hearing that he might be playing fullback for the rest of the season. So that's a problem, because you want him at the top end, of course. He might still score goals from there, but it's more difficult for him to do that as a fullback. But as you said there, Odegaard, Martinelli was my big tip earlier on in the season. He was in my team for the first kind of half of my campaign. And Smith Rowe. Now their prices have gone up because Arsenal have done well, 5.7 and 5.3 respectively. Not particularly expensive overall, Odegaard 5.5, but now they're expensive because their form isn't showing any real value. So this is why we went with Cedric this week and said, if you want an Arsenal player, you want to try and hopefully get something out of their double up, go for them. Whereas 6 weeks ago, Haider, this would have all been a whole show. We'd have been talking about Arsenal midfielders, how is it Odegaard this week and Martinelli, or, is it time to bring Smith Rowe back because he scored 6 goals in 10 games, or all of those things that were really bright for Arsenal not so long ago. are now pretty bleak and glum. So if Arsenal fall off at the end of the campaign and say they just don't have enough intestinal fortitude to get top 4, that is going to reflect in your FPL numbers. However, if you gamble on Arsenal, because you're an Arsenal fan maybe, and you look at these players and you stick with them to the end of the campaign, and they do really well against Man United, against Tottenham, and these big matchups that they've got coming up, which they could do, it's still a big gamble, isn't it? It's the form book is saying to you at the moment, don't do it. But if you want to guess because you're 1 millionth in the world, somewhere like that, you're in the top 10% only, and you're looking for numbers and you want to just play the game a little bit more relaxed, then you might go for these Arsenal players. For me, I won't be touching them.
Yeah, I need to make a decision on Saka. I think, I'll leave him in for the moment because it really depends. Maybe I'll gamble and say, look, he did play left back the other day against Palace, and that takes a massive chunk out of Arsenal's attack. He's been so good this year.
But he can still get assists from there. This is the thing. He'll still be pushing forward. So even though playing at fullback, we do now know that the modern fullback is a forward in a way. So it's one of these things. It's that Saka might not be the one that I'd be sacrificing, but those other midfielders, I might now be looking at and saying, can I get value elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to United and look, the form guide. Actually, not surprising if you watch United week in, week out. Fred has probably been United's best player. Look at the price, Rob, 4.9. And if you're looking to move out Ramsey, which is what I'm looking to do, I'm looking at Fred. Very rarely am I going for United players. His form 7.5. Sancho, expensive, but he's the next player on that list at 4.5. His form, Fernandes, very expensive, not great form at all. And then looking down there, we laughed off air, didn't we? Because McTominay is 0, but he's been playing. So I don't understand what's going on. At least Lingard's not been playing. If you laugh, you don't cry. But look, Paul Pogba as well sort of dropped off in terms of his form. It was just strange as well because he is playing further forward. But look, we're not scoring goals, not scoring enough goals, and obviously not getting enough assists, and it's just dour. But Fred's been really good, playing more advanced position at that price. And you're looking for someone who's very reasonably priced. You could do much better than Fred, really.
Yeah, dour if you're a Man United fan and you watch Man United. But if you're, again, looking for opportunities at FPL, there is definitely opportunity here now with United, because it's the same question as we've just posed with Arsenal. And that is that, United have been awful for a few weeks now, but they've got an opportunity of top 4 still. It is still there. United fans rightfully don't believe that they can do it. But that's not to say those lot don't think they can do it. Of course, they believe they can do it. They just have to turn up and play better football. So it's about digging into the numbers for United, the metrics, and trying to find some opportunity. So, I decided today that we would look at the midfielders and a certain forward who we'll talk about in a second. But we look at Fred at 4.9 all season long. He's been really good value and his form's been pretty good. Play more as a number 8 this year rather than a number 6, getting up the other end of the pitch, getting those kind of what I would call touch-off assists, for players putting the ball in the back of the net from the edge of the area. I think we saw that with Cristiano's hat-trick the other day. And he's one of these players, I think, at 4.9 that you'd be quite happy to bring into your team and just stash on the bench if that was the case. Do you know what I mean? So if one week you had other players that you wanted to use, you wouldn't really be that bothered if you put, Fred on your own bench, would you? However, with the double game week with Man United, there is this opportunity that United, if they say have these 3 good games in 2 weeks, that you're going to get returns from somewhere. So at the top, Fred, we've just talked about him, obvious. Sancho, bit expensive, as you said as well, 8.9. Form is good. Form was awful in the last match that I saw him play. Didn't look like a footballer, let alone someone who was going to help you score points in FPL. But Fernandes, I think, is the interesting one at 11.6. Brand new contract at Manchester United. A premium player whose numbers have dropped off, obviously. But his form's not horrendous. And at 11.6, again, if you're looking for a premium that might be able to just pop in the last 7 weeks of the season, if Man United get top 4, or even close to top 4, Bruno Fernandes is going to get points. 100%. He will get points somewhere along the line. But it's just about what do you gamble on. If you want to go into United, do you go with the guys 4.9 million with someone like Fred? Do you go a more mid-ranger like Sancho, or do you go big on a Fernandes? Even Paul Pogba at 7.4 is worth consideration. And just down a little bit lower there, Alanga, 4.8, still starting matches. And for that whole kind of midfielder, again, players that you want to stash and bench, It's easy, isn't it, for 4.8? You don't feel bad about it. You might still play him, and he's going to get a goal or two here or there, isn't he, towards the end of the campaign? You know he'll get opportunities. So with United, not huge kind of double two-footed tackles into this about buying their players, but there is opportunity if Man United get anywhere near the top four at the end of the season.
Not going to happen, Rob, in my opinion.
Because you're a United fan and you're glum like all of us. But this is an FPL show, and this is talking to the masses who really don't care if United are doing well or not.
I would definitely be considering Fred. I mean, look, you're just looking at his numbers here. You know, his form's very good. He's only owned by 1.1%.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a great one. But let's move on quickly and talk about
influence, though. Just look at his influence. 18th out of 299.
Yeah.
So he is delivering. So Man United fans don't want Man United players at the moment. But if I'm not a Man United fan, I'm looking at him with like clear eyes and going, at that price, 4.9, ownership of 1%. That's a differential for me because 99% of teams haven't got him. You know, you could bring him in very easily and he could give you decent returns, goals and assists. And he is the one Man United player who actually looks like he's got an engine on him at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to Cristiano. And what surprised me when we actually had a look at this is look at his form. Probably supplemented by the fact he scored that hat trick.
That's the hat trick
against Spurs. Yeah, and he hasn't obviously played for a while. He's been injured or sick. Look, if you're looking to move Salah out, and you want to take a gamble, Ronaldo's probably one of those players to do that.
Yeah, I think now that United are out of the Champions League and out of every competition in the world, there's every chance that Ronaldo will start pretty much every game because he's going to be looking to pad his stats, help United get in the top four. And he's still the main primary player at Manchester United, let's be honest. You know, all season long, the focus has been very much on Cristiano. I think when you look at his numbers here, again, no surprise, like I've said before, haven't I? You know, with Cristiano, he's always going to deliver numbers. It's just that whether he can really help you as an FPL manager for the whole of a season. Now, earlier in the campaign, the answer to that was 100% no chance. You know, he was kind of like 12.2 million and he kind of went 7 or 8 games where he just blanked, you know, just wasn't scoring goals. And it was a good strategy to avoid him. Now, again, going into the last 7 weeks, is Cristiano a good differential? And I would say absolutely 100%. It says there, obviously, at the top, there's 75% chance of playing because he is ill. I think he probably will play. And if he doesn't play, he will, in those 3 games over 2, I'm sure he'll play the double game week next week. Ownership of 18.5%. That's pretty high, isn't it? It's kind of like for a player that might not have been doing it up until very recently. But there will be managers that did buy him the week before Tottenham, because a lot of people did, and he got that hat trick. And they are the ones sat top of their leagues because of that decision. A little bit of a gamble with a big payoff. So will I be buying Cristiano? The answer to that at the moment is still no. Very, very high value at 12.2. I'd rather be looking at Harry Kane as a striker, I think, for the rest of the season. But there's no doubt that Cristiano in the last 7 games of the season, he might get 15 goals. He might go absolutely mad. And if Man United do find a way of getting in the top 4, what are they, 2 points off the top 4, something like that? You know, or 3 or 4 points off the top 4. They're not going to be looking at the league at the moment as United players and completely giving up. I think they'll look at the remaining fixtures and they'll feel that they could go out there and do some of their individual brilliance rather than team play and win some football matches. So you can see if United go on the charge just towards the back end of the season, they've got a short enough window now for these top players to accumulate points in a quite dramatic fashion.
Let's move on now to Saints and James Ward-Prowse. We spoke about him quite a lot, actually, Rob, to be honest, because he went through that nice purple patch, didn't he? And he's got 7 goals and 4 assists this season. You know, he's got the 11 goal contributions. Really good points total as well. 121 points this season. Good form, 4.7. He got a goal against Leeds last week. And you look at the influence as well. Look, and the creativity. Influence 4, creativity 2. And he obviously is very high up in the ICT ranking overall in the top 20. So he's definitely an option when you're looking to try and buy into Saints because Broyo is out now. Because obviously they're playing Chelsea, can't play against his parent club. So, look, he takes all the set pieces. And at that price, 6.4, if you're looking to shift out someone like Saka, he's not a bad option.
Yeah, like I would say James Ward-Prowse is one of those players that when you're starting the season and you do your mock draft of players, he should always be in your first 5 midfielders because he's always cheap. He takes all the set pieces and he returns a certain amount of numbers. Of course, when you confirm your team, he might be the first one that you lose. But as you look at it at the moment, the gamble with James Ward-Prowse is really about whether Southampton can utilise their double game week. So you know that if they do, again, Ward-Prowse is likely to be central to that. However, when you look at the recent numbers, it's up and down. So against Leeds, good numbers, 10 points, then a blank, a blank, a blank, a blank, a kind of blank, and another blank. And that is James Ward-Prowse in a nutshell. That's kind of exactly how he goes. However, with 7 weeks to go, if Southampton have a little bit of a drive, obviously try and finish well in mid-table, moving up towards the top half of the table. If they kind of end up anywhere near there, again, James Ward-Prowse, their captain, will be one of those main players. Also, we've got to remember with the final part of the season, we're now moving into kind of a World Cup cycle. And a lot of these England players who are on the fringe are going to be looking for these runs of form that get them highlighted. And James Ward-Prowse is definitely one of those players, not an automatic pick in England's midfield, but he's going to show himself towards the end of this season and going into next season that his form is strong and that he can show that he can return numbers. So overall numbers for the season, 7-4, nothing to write home about, but as you just said, their total points, that obviously includes the bonus point system, 121 points for a player of 6.4%, only owned by 5.8%. That's pretty good. Influence, 4th. ICT ranking for midfielders, 4th. He takes everything, doesn't he, for Southampton? He is the guy, if someone wants to, choose the digestive biscuit out the box, it's always going to be James Ward-Prowse, isn't it? So he's the main guy at Southampton. He always will be. And he's a good little risk at the moment. I think for 6.4 million, if you've got some money in the bank, he is definitely worth a punt.
Absolutely, he is Mr. Southampton, Rob. I mean, he feels like he's been there forever, and he's a really good little player, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
and I think he is underrated in the fact people just think he's obviously for FPL he's great because he's on all the set pieces, but he is a good player around the park in general, and he is influential, and you saw that with the ICT ranking. Let's look at El Yunusi again. Laughed before we started recording this because he's only owned by 0.2%, which is really low, but he's in great form or good form, 4.7 points per game. Didn't really get great returns last week, but someone that's forced his way back into it. He was actually out on loan, wasn't he, for a year or year or two, and he came back, and he's obviously forced his way into starting lineup. If you want to go for a cheaper option than James Ward-Prowse and you want to take Broyo out and you want to have a Saints player, 5.4 million is a good price.
I think he's perfect for if you're using your wild card this week and you need to balance the books. You somehow need a cheaper defender in there, maybe a cheaper goalkeeper, a cheaper midfielder, and a cheaper attacker. It's easy to do the attacker this year, really easy. It's much more difficult to choose the cheap end of the midfield market simply because it's more spread out. So at 5.4 million, he could help you get Salah, or he could help you get Ronaldo. He could help you get Kane or Son because of his cheap value. And he's someone who said they're 0.2% owned. It just goes to show that there are players out there, real footballers I'm talking about, not FPL players, that are doing quite well in terms of their personal form. You said here, honestly, is 4.7 in the form market. And he's worth it at that. 5.4 million. Again, you want to kind of balance the books. He's a really, really good addition. A little bit cheaper than James Ward-Prowse as well. So if you want to save that million and use it on again, to kind of boost maybe one of your goalkeepers, your defenders, that seems to be where the decent points are coming this season, then that's understandable. But he's definitely worth a punt, I think, with Southampton having a double game week.
Let's move on now. Final segment of the show. This is your provisional Game Week 32 team. You will probably have a little play around before the deadline on Friday. But let's sort of go from back to front. So you have mentioned Ramsdale, someone that you might be looking to bring out. Arsenal have leaked a couple of goals, haven't they, the last 5-6 game weeks. Look, you've gone heavy as well. Cancelo, Robertson, Trent. That's interesting. I'm interested to actually know whether you take out one of Trent or Robertson, and you maybe look for a different option. You got Doherty there as well. Kulusevski, I've got him. Foden, same with me. Son, I haven't got, but you've got him, and I think he's a strong candidate as well for captain. Salah, you've got him for the moment, and Saka as well, and then Dennis up front. And then on the bench, you've got Sarr, Amati, Rodriguez, and Broya. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about this team so far, some of the changes you'll be looking to make.
So yes, I'm waiting until the deadline. So we're doing the show on Wednesday because we have to. I like to do the show 2 days before the deadline, and we've got a Friday deadline this week. We've had more Friday deadlines this year than I can remember in previous seasons. That's made it really difficult. It doesn't correspond with the press conferences and things like that. It kind of hurts your ability to dig into information. But my team here, I've not messed around with it too much as it stands, and I'll kind of explain the method to my madness. It's that Manchester City, as we said here, out of the two teams chasing the title, City are going to rotate their options because that's just what Guardiola does. Now, through the season, I always say, doesn't matter too much because even when they come off the bench, they'll still get you points. Now, that does stand. I think when you look at City's run and the fact that they're running into Liverpool, there's some kind of wisdom around going with one of them or the other. So is this the time? Now, the show was about Salah to start off with, but the flip question on Salah is that do you stick with Salah and his mates, Robertson and Alexander-Arnold, three players who are just perennial point scorer in FPL, and do you move on the City contingent? So some people say, well, does it need to be one or the other? Well, this week is key because obviously they're playing each other. And you said it at the top of the show, and it could end up like this. It might be a 0-0 match, which will be fine because Cancelo, Robertson, and Alexander-Arnold will get 6 points. But if you've got maybe a team weighted towards the forwards in those two teams, then you're going to be stuffed, aren't you? We're seeing it with Salah, poor returns in the last 3 of the last 4 game weeks. So that's what you have to balance up. It's difficult. I don't want to get rid of Cancelo. I've stuck with Foden all season long, even when he's not played matches, and they have given me returns. I'm in the top 0.3% in the world. This is when you sometimes want to tinker, but you shouldn't. So I'm going to wait until the very, very last minute. I've got 2 free transfers this week. I've deliberately saved them because I've got no chips. And I will look at it in a little bit more depth. I'm going to stick with Saka. I don't see the point in getting rid of him against Brighton. I might have to get rid of him in future weeks if he really is going to play fullback and maybe not get us forward as much. But as you said, at the other end of it, Dennis just came in for Broja because Broja just said obviously he's not eligible. Jay Rodriguez actually means that my team is still active this week because Burnley have got a Wednesday match this week. So game week 31 is still going on for me. So he might get me some extra points, but I'm happy to sit him on the bench that week. We just talked there about Wolves earlier on. Sarr, he's now moved to my bench because of that. And that's why I brought Ramsdale back in. Amate as well, you see there, he's gone up to 4 million now. I brought him in at 3.9. So he's another player that for Leicester, if Leicester have a good last 3, 4, 5 weeks, he could be a very, very nice differential into
playing week in, week out for a while now. They've had a couple of injuries at the back.
Big time.
And, yeah, he's been good. He's been really good.
He's helped them recover their form as a team. So he didn't start at Old Trafford, but he did come on. But he has been starting pretty much every other match. But the back four as well, like the Tottenham question is a really interesting one as well. The fact that they are performing in fits and starts. So Kulusevski and obviously Son, I think are pretty easy picks for them. But then do you go with, say, Doherty, I think who got 14 points last week, or do you try and somehow move your money around to get Harry Kane in your team? Again, if you're a Tottenham fan, you're probably going for the Kane option. But at the moment, I quite like Doherty. He's still very value, I think 4.7, something like that. Really good value. And he's a forward. He's not playing as a defender. He never plays as a defender. So you're always looking for those differentials in your back 4 or 5 who are effectively attacking wing backs.
Absolutely. And what's your big tip for this game week?
The big tip is to stay away from tempting double game weeks just because they're double game weeks. So that might sound like a double negative, but this is how some managers this week are going to mess up, because they're going to be so heavily focused on the double game week coming up in next week that they're not going to pick and choose their options. I think the big tip for me, as I just said there, is what I just went over, is the Man City factor. You know, whoever your Man City 3 are, I think most will have 3, but I've only got 2 at the moment. Is this the point where you sell them and maybe even bring them back right at the end of the season? You know, like, so if City are looking for 4 wins of the last 4 matches to win the title, you might then go, yeah, they're just going to hammer whoever they play, and it's time now to go heavy on De Bruyne. But that logic also does pay off for Liverpool. You know, Liverpool are going to be looking to win every match. They've got to. It's the end of the season. So do you sell Salah? That was the question we asked at the start of this show. And my answer, personally for me, is no. Don't sell him yet. I think that if Liverpool go to City and perform, and I get the feeling they will. I'm tipping Liverpool to win the game. I think Liverpool are going to beat Man City in that game. It might only be 1-0, might only be 2-0. But if Liverpool do well in that match, you can bet Salah will have his hands all over the prize.
Yeah, I'm staying with Salah. It's just too much of a risk for me, and I could go Son, but no, Salah's
I've got
a well
both.
for me.
I'm happy with both.
See, I'm thinking, working through my team. I've still got my wild card. Obviously, I want a bench boost next week. I want a wild card with the view. I wanted the wild card game week 34, so that I could prepare for game week 36, which is likely to be another double. But I'm thinking about it now, and I'm thinking, do I get Son in now? Do the wild card now? Plan. But you can't plan 4 game weeks in advance. I think it's too much of a risk.
Yeah, the difficult fact is with this, we'll close on the show on this, is that now you've only got 7 game weeks left. You better start using your chips. So one season, I saved all my chips for the last 3 weeks of the season. I gave it a go 1 year and I got nothing back. No returns at all. I changed my whole team around, bought all the form players, and they all just got rotated in and out their teams. They just didn't play and they didn't get the same numbers. And I think that I used my wild card in game week 36 1 year, and I got something like 37 points for it that week. And I was gutted because you're obviously looking for more than 100 with a wild card change. So it's difficult more to read now. When you dig into the numbers, there isn't huge opportunities elsewhere. It's just about looking at the smaller numbers now and kind of making sure that you're doing well. You know, last week I got 60 points. Other people only got kind of 30s and 40s because they didn't look at it as an opportunity. You know, there was an opportunity in there just to make sure that you were playing with a certain number there. And there was like 1 double game week, and it was just about trying to elongate in the process a bit. I think people sometimes get obsessed with waiting too long, and then your chips become less valuable. I would say to you, Haider, if you can change it this week, you can exploit this double game week and that double game week. So you need to kind of project yourself forward. You're right, though. Normally 4 to 6 game weeks, really tough to kind of work out, because what happens, players get injured. You could be perfectly positioned and someone gets injured, another player gets injured, another player gets injured, and suddenly you're wishing that you had your wild card still. But don't sit on your chips too long, because chips are there to make you points. And the last 2 game weeks traditionally are not great game weeks for accumulating points.
Absolutely. Guys, we're going to finish on that. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Give us a follow on @TF Masterclass. Give myself a follow on @Haider_Rubbani. And give Rob a follow on @Rob_B. We are back. Masterclass is back as well this Saturday after the Everton game. Straight after the Everton game. Fingers crossed Man United can win. Good luck with this game week, and we'll see you all next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.